when you start espousing these views, whatever they are, eventually you believe them, just because it's just so much emotionally easier. And anything you say over and over again starts sounding true, especially if everyone else is also saying the same things.
Welcome to the podcast currently and soon to be formerly known as The Unspeakable. I'm slowly transitioning over to The Unspeakeasy with Meghan Down. That would be me, your host. Before I introduce this week's guest, the novelist and cultural critic Lionel Shriver, I'm just going to say quickly what I said last week, which is that I am so glad you are here. I'm glad you're listening to the podcast. I'm glad you have stayed with me all these years and months. I know I've thrown a lot at you these last few months. I've been doing live streams and posting the recordings of the live streams for paying subscribers. I've been dropping audio excerpts from my book, The Catastrophe Hour, as we have our book club, which is in full swing, meeting every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can still join. You can drop in anytime if you're an annual paying subscriber. You're seeing a lot in your feed that wasn't necessarily a podcast interview. That is going to change. I'm still going to do all that stuff, but I'm not going to clog up the main feed with it. If you want to see that stuff, you can go to theunspeakablepodcast.com, become a paying subscriber. You know the drill. But the main interview podcast isn't going anywhere. It never went away in the first place. We are here. Okay, a couple very quick announcements about events. The first is that October 11th and 12th in New York City is our big Unspeakeasy weekend, co-ed, extreme retreat. Small though, still small, limited number of attendees, a small gathering for big ideas featuring many, many speakers, including Carol Hooven, who was the guest on the podcast last week, John McWhorter, who will be a guest coming up soon. Peter Moskos will be there, Mike Pesca, Ben Appel, Lisa Selin Davis, Alana Newhouse is the editor of Tablet. She's coming up on the podcast soon. Rob Henderson will be there. Lots and lots of people, including myself, and people I haven't even mentioned because I don't want to mention every single person every single time. You can find out who they are by going to theunspeakeasy.com/NYC to sign up. And again, spaces are limited, so get on that. Before that, though, in New York City, on September 3rd, I will be in conversation with Lionel Shriver, the very guest you're about to hear. We will be talking about The Catastrophe Hour, my book. We will be talking about her books. We will be talking about her columns in The Spectator, what we have in common as writers, where we differ, what makes somebody a contrarian, although I don't really think of myself as a contrarian. I beg to differ. This is happening at the Village Underground Comedy Club at 6 p.m. on September 3rd. We will be out of there by 7:30. For tickets, go to meghandaum.com/events, also posted in the show notes. If you hurry, you can take advantage of our sale. Use promo code Catastrophe18 and get your ticket for $18 if you purchase by August 1st. It's going to be a great evening, and you're going to get a taste of it right here. Lionel has been on the podcast several times. She's the author of 17 novels, the best known of which is We Need to Talk About Kevin, which very memorable novel was made into a film starring Tilda Swinton. Last year, she published Mania, which we talk about here. She's a columnist at The Spectator, writing about many of the kinds of things we cover on this podcast, including gender, which we're going to talk about in this interview. It is another great one. So here is Lionel Shriver. Lionel, welcome back to the podcast.
Always enjoy talking to you.
So there's a lot I want to talk with you about. I think you were last here. We were talking about Kamala Harris. It was November. And the tenor of that conversation was, is she secretly relieved to have lost? I wonder if she's even more relieved now or less. I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, it's now just long enough away that she is able to romanticize the experience and even, I gather, entertain the notion of subjecting us to this kind of torture again in 2028. So yeah. I'd be really, really, really surprised if there was a serious campaign to get her to be the nominee again. I mean,
Oh, no. Yeah, she's not going to be the nominee. But
that's a
actually,
complete fantasy.
right. And this is not what I want to talk with you about, but just for a second, since we're here, I mean, I don't think, I mean, you don't live in the States. I don't think do you vote, do you vote in the States actually anymore? You haven't.
I can vote in presidential elections, but I'm not resident in the United States. And
Okay.
that means that
Okay.
I can't vote in local or even state.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I want to, maybe we'll get back to this because I want to ask you if, given what's now going on with the Trump administration, if you feel any more sanguine about Kamala than you did before. I mean, I'm assuming you did not vote for her, but is there a part of you that wishes you had? Not that it would have mattered.
No.
Okay. Okay.
I never spend a moment in the day wishing that we had President Kamala.
Because
however, fractious and weird this administration is, I don't wish that we had once again given over the administration to a committee, because I think Kamala would be so out of her depth that she would just give over to the left-wing aides in the White House, and they'd be running things again, just as they did during the entire Biden administration. So, no, I'd like to see an end of that. At least we know who's president.
Okay, yeah, that we do. All right, so there's a lot I want to cover in this conversation. I want to talk about your most recent novel, Mania. I want to talk about your forthcoming novel, which has to do with immigration, which is something that I'm thinking a lot about here in Los Angeles. I want to talk about the trans debate, which we've both been covering for a very long time. I believe you first wrote about it in 2016.
Yes.
But I want to start actually for just a few minutes here, talking about the culture, the literary world. We're recording this on July 18th. Congress just approved Trump's bill that would remove funding for public radio and public television. Defund NPR has finally happened. I don't know about you, but like as an author, as a writer, as someone of my generation and sort of station in life, NPR has been a huge part of my life, sort of like the soundtrack, the kind of white noise of my intellectual life from the time I was a teenager. It certainly helped me in my career. To get on NPR as an author was a very big deal back in the day. I'm assuming that was, some of your experience would be the same. How do you feel about defunding public radio once and for all?
I'm just curious. When was the last time you were on NPR?
Oh, on it? I was actually on it in 2019. There was one host that had me on to talk about the problem with everything. It was Meghan Chakrabarti. I'm mangling her last name. She had I think it was, is it Here and Now? I think it was out of Boston. There was one show that would have me on to talk about culture war stuff. I'm not going to say it was combative, but it was not friendly. But at least she entertained some of my ideas. Yeah, that was for sure the last time.
Okay, I would say 2019 is probably late.
Yes.
Right?
She was sticking her neck out. Let's put it that way. Yes.
That is very recent for them to have had a heretic like you on the airwaves. I actually can't tell you the last time I was on NPR. I used to get on one of their main shows every time I brought a book out, and that ended. So, that's naturally going to color my reaction to the partial defunding. And, let's be fair, the proportion of federal funding for NPR and PBS is fractional. So it's not as if NPR is going to disappear, and nor is PBS. So this is not existential.
Right.
If anything, they will be loosed to be even more fanatically left-wing than they already are, though that would be hard. So, I mean, my feeling is about both those entities is one of betrayal, that they have ceased to be what they had originally intended to be, which is a relatively neutral space for the exploration of public issues. So that doesn't mean that you don't say anything, but it does mean that you at least try to address controversies with balance. And they long ago stopped even pretending to represent more than one side of a given issue, if it was on the list, and we know what the list is. It's a very set number of topics, and we know what the right position is. And NPR especially just went off the deep end. I have a brother in Iowa. He used to have NPR on all the time, basically in the background all day. Doesn't do that anymore. Couldn't stand it. And they went nuts on the diversity front. And that's one of the reasons that you and I would have been shut out. One of the many reasons. Obviously, we don't pass the ideological purity test. But on top of it, just being female is not good enough anymore. And therefore, we don't check enough diversity boxes. And this is they're out there advocating for the furthest left of the Democratic Party, and that's not doing a public service. That's distributing propaganda, and and to a slightly lesser degree, PBS does the same thing. I still subject myself to the news hour virtually every night, but it drives me insane. We're going to talk about the trans thing, but that's a good example. If they have a story about, say, a state that has passed a law that means you can't get gender-affirming care if you're a minor, then they'll have a family on with a trans kid and all upset about maybe not being able to get their cross-sex hormones.
Yes,
and
life-saving care.
Right. And then there's nobody else. I mean, there's never the other side. There's never a family with a kid who has gone off the rails and thinks that changing sex, which you can't even do, is going to solve all his or her problems. And the parents are actually kind of grateful that finally it's illegal in their state and they can get the kid therapy instead. I mean, that would never happen on the news hour. And they do this repeatedly.
Yeah.
Representing in depth the left wing side of an argument, and then it's as if there isn't another side. And they're really toned down. Just actually by way of correction, I want to say Meghan Chakrabarty had me on, and the show was on point. It was not Here and Now. It was On Point out of WBUR. And it's funny because I'm pulling this up. Meghan Daum has a problem with everything: feminism, cancel culture, and the internet. I guess if your book is called The Problem with Everything, you're asking for those kinds of show titles all the time. But yes, just want to make that correction. Exactly. I know exactly what you're saying. It's funny. CBS also canceled Stephen Colbert show. Yes, I just
today.
read about this morning.
So this is fascinating because he has also gotten incredibly uninteresting in the last 10 years. I think he's a massive talent. I loved the Colbert Report. Presumably they've canceled it because there's just no audience left. And really this begs the question, is there an audience left for any of this stuff? And is it because everybody's listening to podcasts? What do you think?
I think the simple answer is yes, that everyone is listening to podcasts and also just doing other streaming, and the whole late night talk show format, the program hacks notwithstanding, is yesterday. It's old. I think it's played out. I don't especially like that format. I find it rigid. I find the interviews with celebrities, tedious. It's all very stiff and posturing and not actually very funny. I just think it's an old format, and it's outlived its usefulness. Now, I actually checked out the comments on the New York Times coverage of his being sacked, and that a lot of people think it's all about Trump, and that there's this merger coming up with, I think it's Paramount and Skydance, and that has to be approved by the Trump administration, and it all has to do with the $16 million paid over the 60 Minutes Kamala Harris.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there's a left wing conspiracy theory behind this, the end of the of Colbert. I'm not sure I buy it. I think that the advertising revenue, I mean, that was in the article, that it's in a very short period of time has halved. And therefore also suggests that's going to keep going down. And lots of other talk shows have gone off the air. So This is part of a pattern. And I would be surprised if it is primarily driven by the merger or the so-called bribe of $16 million over the 60 Minutes story. So, I mean, if that makes people find this more interesting, fair enough. But I think it's the explanation is more mundane, that that it is tired. You know, it goes back to the 1950s, that format, and I think it's the kind of show that was born of television that was more primitive, less well funded. You know, it was cheap.
Yeah, and live. I mean, it was live, right? And it was kind of exciting. Something could go wrong, and there was a live audience, and you know.
So, and you have a live band. You know, that's. But none of this stuff is necessary anymore. And I mean, for example, I'm willing to watch Hacks. I've watched all three.
I love Hacks. Do you love Hacks? I love it.
Right?
It's getting better and better.
I've seen all 3 seasons. But it was telling that I'm willing to watch Hacks, but I wouldn't watch the show that the
it's
main
about.
character is on. For anyone who has not seen Hacks, it's about a much older comedian finally getting her own
kind of like a Joan Rivers type, less bawdy, I think. But yeah, that generation of comic, maybe a little younger. And the whole premise was that she was in line to sort of host the Tonight Show or something back in her heyday in the 80s, and they skipped over her, and she's been bitter about this, and she does cheesy Vegas residencies and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's a great show. But yeah, that format is tired. The opening monologue, the 3 guests kind of thing, the band. At the same time,
and also, Colbert in particular, and this is true of any number of these talk show people, very political, but always, in the NPR, PBS vein, very anti-Trump. And there's nothing edgy about being anti-Trump. It's tedious. So it's obvious. It's in some ways constantly taking cheap shots because it's not hard to criticize Trump.
It's
right. So it's dreary, it's predictable, and it's playing to a particular audience. And it turns out that audience is getting much smaller because, is it really that entertaining? Even if you agree with all of those positions, even if you are on the far left of the Democratic Party, is all this stuff really funny? Do you really want to be pandered to in this way?
Yeah. But were you a fan of like The Daily Show back in the 2000s, for instance? Jon Stewart? No, you weren't.
For the same reason.
Okay.
The same reason. It was a particular political perspective, which increasingly I did not share. and it was boring. You know, the jokes were predictable. They also had, you know, a cheap quality because you're playing to the peanut gallery,
Yeah.
right? You're telling people what they want to hear, and that's not interesting. And it's especially not interesting if you feel excluded, like you're not in the peanut gallery. But I think it's ultimately flat, and even for people who share that view.
I have to admit, I did watch The Daily Show sort of all through that period, and I found it entertaining. It's the sort of the poking fun at random redneck, you know, Congress people from unknown places, and kind of showing how unsophisticated they were. Yeah, I did fall for a lot of that. I think he did poke fun at earnestness on the left too,
Sure.
enough that I think it was more palatable. In terms of Colbert, and this actually segues into something I want to talk about with, you know, in terms of Mania, like on the level of performance, I thought that the Stephen Colbert was just like a tour de force. I mean, his whole shtick was that he was making fun of Bill O'Reilly, and he was like embodying this character, and he could sustain it over this long period of time. And I just thought, like on an artistic level, it was pretty impressive. And he seemed like somebody who was capable of, like, you know, multidimensional thought. And he then became just a completely vanilla, like boilerplate resistance person, and it got very uninteresting. We do know that he's a practicing Catholic, and I think I and a lot of people were sort of wondering, like, what's really underneath there, and that makes me think of the dynamics in Mania, your novel that came out last year, which is about this concept. It's called mental parity. So basically, the mania that has swept the culture is treating everybody equally, regardless of how intelligent they are. And we can talk about.
Actually, the concept is there's no such thing as variable human intelligence.
Sorry, we're not even going to define this.
Everyone is equally smart.
Equally smart. Yes, IQ is
any difference in what they cannot do is just what we call a processing issue.
Right.
So,
or a systemic. It's been systemic discrimination. So at the center of this,
cognitive discrimination.
Yes.
Is the worst thing you can do.
Right.
It replaces racism as what is most offensive and what will get you canceled.
Right. And the main character is a woman named Pearson who teaches at a college in Pennsylvania called Voltaire, which is very, very, very clever, because obviously Voltaire was the one who said anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. But, you know, she's very skeptical of all of this. She has a close friendship with Emery, who's a good friend of hers, who's a sort of aspiring, she's a journalist, you know, sort of ambitious cultural commentator sort of person. And Emery does this thing, I think, that we've seen in a lot of people, which is that she capitulates. She takes the opportunity to present opinions that she doesn't actually hold. She goes along with this. You know, she criticizes smartism is the thing that everybody's fighting, right? So, and it really creates a great deal of pain between these two women, and I think that's like something really moving in the book. But it kind of reminds me of like what we saw with Stephen Colbert. Like, I wonder if like Emery is a sort of version of Stephen Colbert, maybe, where he thought one thing, but he was willing to go along with the other thing, just out of sheer self-preservation, maybe.
Well, I mean, during this last 10 years or so, we've seen a lot of people passionately adopt, you know, what we call woke positions, all of them, because it's a set menu. And because it's in their self-interest. I mean, that's where the culture has been, that's where the power is. And especially if you are white, you want to espouse all these progressive views in order to keep yourself from getting booted out. But one of the things that happens in the book, because I think this is commonplace, out of sheer opportunism, plenty of people take fashionable positions But it's really takes a lot of energy to maintain a Chinese wall in your own head. And when you start espousing these views, whatever they are, eventually you believe them, just because it's just so much emotionally easier. And anything you say over and over again starts sounding true, especially if everyone else is also saying the same things. So this became, this is the new the reality that the left constructed, and everyone's got with the program, and that is the nature of social manias. I mean, my whole purpose with that novel was to address the larger phenomenon of suddenly everybody believing the same thing, however weird or off. Trans comes to mind. Oh, it's actually
was this was smartism a proxy for or was mental parity a proxy for gender ideology?
It's the closest parallel, because both of those ideologies are in defiance of biological reality. I mean, people are not all equally smart, and this is demonstrable. And you can't change sex. I mean, it's absolutely impossible. And yet we pretend that you can, or should try, which is a tremendous waste of
I mean,
personal capital on an individual level, and a waste of social capital on
just to steelman this for a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think this is worth just pausing on. Like, is there anybody who really thinks you can change sex, or is the argument, some people, their brains do not match their biological physical reality, and so we owe it to them to help them simulate the other sex so that this can match? Is anybody actually saying you can literally change sex? I mean, obviously this is semantic.
Basically, no, the ideology locates sex in the mind.
Okay.
So your brain has a sex, and it can mismatch your body. So you were given the wrong body.
But are they distinguishing gender from sex? Because they're saying they're
trying to eliminate sex.
Okay.
That's the program.
Okay.
You eliminate sex, you only talk about gender, a word that I only use in quotation marks. I mean, or in relation to language, that's where that word belongs, right?
Right. Yes. And it's funny because Trump just said it. I mean, he makes this big announcement. It's like, he's going to own the left. He's going to own the wokes by saying there are only two, and you think he's going to say sexes, but he says genders.
Yeah.
Which I think it's because people don't want to use the word sex. Like it's easier for them to say gender.
One of the problems with the word sex, as we know, is that it also means intercourse.
Yeah.
Right. And so there are sentences in which one might choose gender because it's going to eliminate that confusion. Gender never means fucking, right?
Definitely
but
not.
But otherwise, it has the word has been used to subvert the concept. So you don't talk about sex in the head, you talk about gender in the head, and then you just don't talk about sex anymore. So if you've located gender in the head, then you can change gender. Because the mind, people can think whatever they want, and then we're supposed to accept that as reality, because all that matters is what they are in their head. And this is goofy. Okay? I mean, it's lunatic. And yet on a national and even international level for many years, it was accepted as reality. And I've gone a distance in my own home. I mean, my husband started off saying, but you have to understand, there are people who deeply believe that they're the other sex. This was back when we were dealing like the 0.00001% people who have a mental problem, right?
Yeah, well, they're truly dysphoric. I mean, they have genuine body dysphoria, right?
Yeah.
However you would call that. Yeah.
And then, but what we have been experiencing for the last almost 15 years is a social mania, and which is completely different. And also, it's worth even challenging at this point that small number of people who are suffering from, I guess, genuine mental illness of dysphoria. Is the best thing to do to carve them up or to give them drugs, or maybe just let them wear a dress? Maybe medicalizing the solution is a mistake. It can largely be addressed by, okay, fine, you're deluded. We accept you're deluded, but you're not going to do any harm if you wear women's clothes.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and I actually, again, I just wanted to sharpen this up. I mean, dysphoria is on a spectrum, right? I'm sure. So when we're talking about the 0.00001%, I mean, I think you and I probably are on the same page here. Like, I always assumed there was this very teeny tiny percentage of people who, like, genuinely would live a much better life if they could present as the opposite sex. Like, this is a genuine, like, sort of reality of their cognitive makeup. And it was, vanishingly tiny. And I don't know if that was referred to.
And
I don't
almost all male.
Yeah,
That's
I guess
what it
so.
used to be.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, and then that is obviously different than the AGP cohort, which I don't put in that category. I'm talking about people who from like a very, very early age, 2 years old, felt that kind of thing. But even then, there was no protocol of medicalizing a child. I mean, this is a pretty recent development. It was the Dutch, the Dutch trials that kind of like experimented with that, and then that we know that the data was all convoluted on that. We don't have to get into that, but I mean, I am with you. I used to be much more generous in my thinking about this. Like, I used to think, okay, maybe there are people for whom this is really the best thing, but I'm with you. I now question the whole thing. Like, it's nobody. It's like literally almost nobody. And if you would, even 3 years ago, I probably would have said, oh, okay, maybe some people, we still should not medicalize them as kids, but this is a real thing in some small cases. And I'm starting to really doubt that.
Yeah, I don't think this is the right way to deal with, what we're often dealing with is a kind of grass is greener sexual envy. I don't like being female, and I think the boys have it better. I'd rather be a boy. This is a very different matter than, of course, people are taught to recite, I am a boy. I have discovered I am a boy.
Yeah.
But that's just programming, right? But the reality is, it is a desire. It is I think those people over there have it better. I want to do that, and I think that's going to make a lot of my problems go away. It's because the people have been miseducated that sex is a choice, and you can be either one you want. And when you're unhappy, which covers almost everybody in the world, then and you are told that you can choose to be the opposite sex, then it seems as if this is perhaps your chance to be happy, because you can change and you can have what those people over there have. Now, the truth of the matter is that both sexes are a drag in one way or another. Personally, I opt for the view that I think it's harder to be a woman, and I just mean that physically. It's full of inconvenience.
Yes.
So, yes. If I could have pressed a button on the way out of the birth canal, I think I'd have pressed the male one. I didn't like periods. I didn't like vulnerability to pregnancy. If I did not want to have a child, I was still in danger of having one. I I would have liked to be physically stronger. I would have liked to be taller. I'm only 5'2". Seems better to me.
I think you just outed yourself as trans. To say if you could have pushed a button upon, entering the world and been male, that you would have chosen that. A lot of people would say that's the definition of a transgender, not even identity, but embodiment.
Yes. Which is one way it's a load of bollocks.
I wouldn't want to be a guy. I think they're completely ruled by their libido, and I think that is incredibly hobbling. I think that would be a terrible burden.
I think I'm a little envious of the libido.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends what stage of life one is in, but I just think it's incredibly distracting. I mean, it gets them in trouble. I mean, it depends on, I guess it depends on how you use it. I don't know.
And, but, as a fiction writer, I get to be men all the time.
Right.
And my new book is completely written from the perspective of a young man. And I enjoy that. I love writing from the male perspective.
Now, but you're allowed to do that because you're a woman. Male authors are not allowed to write from the perspective of women anymore. Anymore?
No. This whole thing of not being allowed. You are certainly allowed. You can write whatever you bloody well want. And I think one of the things that's gone wrong, we're veering off target.
That's fine. I want to ask you one more thing about trans.
In the literary world is that people take to heart all these supposed new rules. I mean, I have this argument with my publisher quite actively and my own agent who informed me, for example, oh no, you can't physically describe people of color in your work, because I had a character, my main character, make the observation that most Central Americans are on the short side, and I couldn't. I was
the characters, not even the character.
Even the character couldn't say that. And besides which, this is just this is verifiably true. Okay. But even if it's verifiably true, I was not allowed. And I said, what do you mean I'm not allowed? Right? Yes, I'm allowed. Then, and the line stays. It's still in the book.
How can your editor, this is your editor? Like the fact that they're even publishing your book,
that was my agent, my own agent, who's supposed to be looking out for my interests. But you see, her version of looking out for my interests, I'm not bad-mouthing my agent, whom I adore. So, Kim, don't take this personally. But she has internalized all this stuff that you can and cannot do. And that has utterly corrupted literature. And it has got into the brains like a fungus of fiction writers, many of whom are left-wing and want to please the progressive literary world. But there are no rules. And there is no rule that men can't write from a woman's perspective. I mean, there would be no Madame Bovary without that.
Yeah.
Countless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have time to address all the great novels that wouldn't exist. And so, you've got to, as a writer now, you're nothing but a pack of cards. There are no rules. And if anything, if I hear about some stupid rule, my impulse is immediately to break it. I mean, there was an especially retarded rule. We're allowed to say that now. I don't know how that happened, but I'm thrilled. That you couldn't use food imagery to describe people of color again. An expression that I never use with a straight face.
You can't use food imagery?
Food. Yeah, you can't like coffee-colored skin.
Oh,
that is an offense, right?
Okay.
That will get your
No more chocolate. No more. Okay.
Yeah, right. No chocolate. Although, of course, it's okay to have a peaches and cream complexion if you're white.
Right. Other than it's a total cliche. And it's bad writing if you were to write that.
Trite, right?
Yeah.
I have a rule against trite. That's a good rule, and I'll adhere to that. And if I use a cliche, then I want to do it wittingly and for good reason. But those are the only rules that I pay any attention to, or grammatical rules, which if I break them, I want to do so consciously and for good reason. Yeah. So let's go back to those kinds of basics. But this whole business of obeying these dopey little rules, and God knows where they come from. Literary writers have done this to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Because they didn't have to pay any attention. And they didn't have, I mean, what? I don't remember which writer it was in Britain recently who announced at an event I was sharing with him that he was no longer going to describe his female characters physically.
That sounds sexist. So they just don't get any description. They're just blank spaces.
Senseless. All that means is he's afraid of getting into trouble. So he's actually going to distort his work in order to avoid offending someone.
Well, it's completely sexist. I mean, John McWhorter has made this point. Like, if you're not allowed to describe Black people, if Disney is not allowed to, have like a Black princess character that has any defects or faults or human qualities, that's a form of erasure, to use the term of art. I mean, this is such a self-own. I mean, we've talked about this kind of circular logic before.
Well, I mean, there have been a couple of pieces recently about how there's been no great art coming out of the literary world for the last 10 or 15 years. And it's no wonder. Although I have to say my reaction to reading such articles is, what do you mean? Haven't you read my books?
I find that too, and then I usually just assume, well, I haven't read the right books. Like, I'm just not well read enough, and so that's why I'm not finding them. But yeah, but okay. But before, I want to ask you one more thing about Mania. Like, you went to the trouble of constructing this world and this movement and this particular Mania. Why didn't you just write about trans?
Well, I may yet. And I've certainly written plenty about it in nonfiction. But that's a very polarizing issue. And as I said, I was mostly interested in addressing the phenomenon of the social mania because, let's face it, they have come hot and heavy during the last 15 years. The Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter thing, especially after George Floyd. I mean, the entire world went insane over one death in the middle of often a completely foreign country on the other side of the world.
Of an extremely problematic person.
Yes.
Was George Floyd.
So COVID was a mania. And right now, by the way, I think climate change is also a mania. And right now we're in the midst of a new one, Wait,
what's that? What's that? What would be that?
The whole anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian hoo-ha ever since October 7th. And which you would think, I mean, that particular event you would think would trigger huge sympathy with Israel and with Jews. But no, right? It's more irrational than that. So instead, we have all these ostensibly left-wing people marching around supporting a terrorist organization that loathes homosexuality, has contempt for women, and is fundamentally genocidal at its core. It's baffling us. And these are the same people who are susceptible to all the other manias. These are the same people.
Right. So
they're just perpetually being washed with this outrage over some new thing, and they didn't make it up. I mean, it's almost a genetic problem. It's as if their immune systems are deficient, and they're just prey to any ideological contagion that comes along. And they will believe it. They will literally believe anything. And
Right.
this is right now that's mostly happening on the left. But I have to say, this is a larger problem than a political one. This is a human one.
Yeah, I mean, there's
People
versions
in
of it on the
general.
right for sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
people in general.
MAGA is a contagion.
Of
MAGA
course.
is a mania. But I just on the Israel thing, I just want to say quickly. I mean, I do think that I agree with you even about the initial reaction, but I do think there was more sympathy for Israel for a period of time, and then a lot of people saw the response from Israel and the destruction of Gaza and have sort of shifted. I mean, sympathy has shifted away from Israel, even within Israel. I mean, the hatred of Netanyahu. I think that there's more dimensions to this. I think that calling
fair,
it
yes,
nothing but a mania is a little bit unfair.
It's entirely possible to have a nuanced view of what's going on in Israel and the Middle East, and to support Israel as I do, and at the same time have grave reservations about how they're dealing with Gaza, as I do, right? But what I'm talking about is more unthinking.
Yeah.
It's something that people do in groups. It is driven by having an enemy, this loathing for Israel. It's got a different texture.
Yes.
And it's not politically informed or historically informed.
No, it's visceral. I mean, it feels like there's something, and this gets to something that is really kind of undergirds a lot of mania, which is that in the end, it's not really intelligence. Because we don't really know how smart any of these characters are, right? Really, like it's
actually
not.
In the end, you do.
Right.
In the
That's
end,
true.
you do.
That's true. That's true.
And it turns out Emery's a lot smarter. The
right.
woman who went along with it, a lot smarter than her friend who put up a rather costly resistance.
Right. Right. And we're yes.
And it turns out her IQ is not that high. It's only 107.
I mean, this is why. I mean, and I wonder too, like about the kids and the other characters. But like, this is something I ask myself all the time: what is it about me that has been so resistant to this kind of these kinds of movements? Because I'm not that smart myself. Like, I don't know what my IQ is. I suspect it's above average.
Mm-hmm. I suspect it is too.
But not that much above, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes they have those those little like spatial relations things. Like, you can sort of know somebody's intelligence based on like if they can shift some shape over here or like something like that. I always fail those. Like I'm really not good at that kind of thing. But I do think that there is something about my temperament that I'm allergic to bullshit. It's just really comes down to that. And how is it for you? Like, how intelligent do you think you are?
Okay. I think I have a middling intelligence. Above average, because it turns out average is really kind of stupid.
I don't even know what the numbers are. They
100,
probably,
that's the way it's designed.
100 is average? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think my IQ is higher than 100. And, the book, in fact, argues this towards the end, that there are all kinds of different intelligence. That is not a very controversial thing to say. So I think I have a certain intuitive intelligence. But like you, and this is a lot of what the book addresses, I am somehow immune to groupthink. It's just, people get all head up about something, and it doesn't affect me. Now, maybe I will consider it. And, for example, when the Me Too thing first got started, I was relatively sympathetic. I mean, there were any number of women who were complaining that they had been sexually harassed or attacked or pushed to put out in order to advance their careers. Totally credible to me. But then it kept going, and it got weirder. And women weren't actually talking about having been abused in any substantial way.
Well,
We remember how it
they
went.
wanted to be part of it.
Oh, they wanted to be a part of it. I mean,
Right.
the very name of it, Me Too,
Exactly. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not
like,
you. Right.
I want in on it. That's
Right.
what it means. So no, I didn't want in on it. I have my own history, which is my business, and didn't chime in. I did not chime in, and it never even occurred to me to do so. So what is it about us that means this stuff just it leaves us cold? I don't know. I have an abnormally extreme emotional reaction to anything that is flagrantly stupid. Okay, now maybe that's just a different way of phrasing that you have a bullshit detector. But yes, I have a bullshit detector. And I look at something and it's ludicrous. And it drives me wild. And maybe too much. Maybe I find it too upsetting. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he admitted that he walks around in a state of rage almost all day. And I said, for me, it's not rage. I live more in a permanent state of derision and disgust, which you'll find amply represented in my books, and that's certainly all over Mania. And you know, the good side of this is at least the world entertains me.
Are you ever disgusted with yourself? Do you ever deride yourself?
Oh, sure. Not so much for my political views, but for doing dumb things. Yeah, I I went to a lot of trouble to make a large batch of chili oil a couple of years ago, and it meant chopping up tiny little pieces of Scotch bonnet chilies, and it took a while, and it came out very well, beautiful red color, and I dropped it on the floor, and it went everywhere, including under the refrigerator. Oh, great. And I went nuts. And it wasn't externally directed. Like, you jostled me. You made me drop this. No, you fucking idiot. Then I, you know, I'm no stranger to that. When I do something stupid, then I hate myself.
Yeah.
And I sometimes go on a tirade. And it's just nothing. And I do the same thing on the tennis court. You know, I do the same thing on the tennis court every time I do I have a glitch in my forehand. I don't hit a forehand this way every time, or I'd have to stop playing tennis. And it's a stupid mistake. It is a beginner's mistake. I hate to admit it, but it means, you know, when you do a forehand, you keep your wrist cocked back. But if you cock it forward in the follow through, it goes right in the net. Duh, right? And I know you're not supposed to do this, and I keep doing it. And it fills me with self-loathing because I have contempt for that mistake. And I know it's wrong, and I don't understand why I keep doing it when I know how wrong it is and that it's going to go straight to the net. So, and that's a point of live and ferocious self-loathing and self-disgust. So this is not an emotion that is foreign to me. So it sometimes the derision will flip on me, and being on the receiving end is very unpleasant.
That's how I am about hitting the curb, driving over curbs with my car. Like, and maybe this gets back to my low IQ in terms of spatial relations. Like, backing out of like a tight, weird space and not being at the right angle. And so I drive over the curb, scrape the bottom of the car, something like that. I hate myself, go insane. Because I could have just taken a little more time, straightened out again. I could have just stopped and thought about it and avoided that. But I just, anyway. This is riveting stuff. But I want to get back to like why we are this way. I mean, my understanding is you grew up did you grow up in a religious household? I know your father was a fairly prominent minister. Do you think that you're reacting to like some kind of religious prescriptive upbringing?
I mean, that's in the mix. I should clarify, I'm not an oranges aren't the only fruit type person. I wasn't brought up in a very repressive fundamentalist household. It was a liberal democratic household. My father was a Presbyterian minister and eventually became president of Union Theological Seminary.
Which is very progressive, we should say.
Very. Yeah, mostly gay.
Surprised they let him in. Okay.
Even back in the day, it was mostly gay. But I was not given a choice as to whether or not I went to church. And I hated going to church. And as I started hating going to church at about the age of 8, and it got worse and worse. And by the time I turned 16, I put my foot down and I said, I'm not going to church anymore. And and then all hell broke loose in the household. But I stuck by my guns. And that was my first experience of departing from orthodoxy and standing up for myself. And that was probably good practice for my adult life. I was also inculcated in the liberal Democrat way of thinking, which I passively adopted for my early adulthood and only started challenging once I moved to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and discovered that the standard liberal democratic view of the Troubles was pro-IRA, and these people were thugs and anything but liberal and violent over a cause that didn't deserve that kind of destruction, and started thinking for myself. And that was my real political education. So I came of age politically kind of late in the day, actually, in my early 30s. So, but then all bets were off, and I felt that I could believe whatever I wanted, and that's how I proceeded ever since. And I also don't feel necessarily driven to put myself into a political category. And I've sometimes been pushed to do so, and I've come up with different solutions. None of them work. I called myself libertarian for a little while, but since nobody seems to know what libertarian means, that really didn't do anything but confuse matters. So at this point, in an American context, I'm probably an independent, which is suitably vague.
Yes, but the squish party. I'm also a member of that. Yes.
I've never liked the whole thing of subscribing to a viewpoint that was that was pre-feast, that I like an a la carte. I want to be able to have views on independent issues, and not necessarily just subscribe to a set menu.
Yeah, and an issue by issue basis. I mean, and exactly. That to me is the definition of heterodox. And of course, that label has gotten completely elasticized and misapplied and become its own tribe. But,
so for example, it is perfectly reasonable to support gay rights and to be happy about gay marriage, and then oppose the trans ideology. You don't have to get captured by that ludicrous initialism.
Well, I think it actually makes sense. I think if you truly support gay rights, you need to be against the bulk of the trans movement.
Yeah.
in fact. But I mean, you said at the, earlier that you wish you had been a boy when you were younger. You changed your name to Lionel. You wrote in your piece in 2016 that you always, you didn't really feel like a girl. You still don't. I think a lot of women relate to that. Do you think that the women who are the most vocal around this issue have that kind of psychological makeup? Is that why we're so incensed over this? Because we don't see ourselves as particularly feminine anyway.
Yeah, I think if you look, I don't want to speak for them, but if you look at the women who have been most outspoken on this issue, a lot of them are British. They don't strike one as especially feminine. Some of them are lesbians. So maybe they're not as attached to their sex.
But wait, you're saying the British women are less feminine? So what you're saying
in general.
is...
I'm talking about particular women.
No, I know. But I mean, but the reason for that is because in the UK, they don't have this like specter of religious fundamentalism that was super anti-gay. And like, they're not constantly fighting this like kind of moral majority era oppressive wall. I think that they don't have that baggage culturally and politically that people have in the US. I mean, that's always been my explanation for why Turf Island, why the UK people are much more outspoken about the trans issue than in the States.
I'm not sure I accept that. I don't think I accept that.
So what do you think it is?
I think the sea change was initiated by a couple of books. As in Mania, the Mania is kicked off by a book. So I still have faith in the printed word.
But they were published in the UK, though. But American publishers wouldn't publish them.
Helen Joyce is trans.
Right.
She was at the London Times. She now works for that outfit called Sex Matters. And that was a very brave book. Made a big difference. Individual women have, and it is mostly women, sticking their heads above the parapet and daring to say what had hitherto been a cancelable sentiment. That's what changed. And it was really, there's the constant debate about, the great man version of history versus, history having its own natural momentum and will and has nothing to do with single people. Well, this is the great women version of history. And I really do think that, I played a small part, and I'm glad I have done so, because I've written repeated columns in The Spectator about this issue, making my editor extremely nervous. But those columns have systematically been put as far back in the magazine as you can put a column without violating the magazine's
without being in the classified section or in the back, and in the personal ads in the back.
And they've often been given misleading headlines, which is like, we're going to publish this, but we're not going to call attention to it.
Right. But something like Abigail Schreier's book, that came out in the US, but that was kind of immediately pigeonholed as heretical. This is somebody who's a conservative. She had an affiliation with the Wall Street Journal, I think. Like, it was immediately framed as somebody on the political right. Whereas I think something like Helen Joyce's book, Trans, in the UK, they were able to say, like, oh, this is just simply part of the intellectual discourse. It's not necessarily politicized. And in the US, it was...
do not misinterpret the atmosphere politically in the UK. You have to understand, and by the way, for anyone who doesn't necessarily know my bio, which I don't expect you to, I lived for 36 years in the UK, so I only recently left. So the UK has wholesale adopted the entire woke agenda from the US, and typically because when you don't originate something, it's often either distorted or even more extreme. I would say, if anything, it is more extreme. It is even more extreme, for example, in
Right.
Ireland, and
Yes, that's true.
throughout the Anglosphere. The whole woke thing is everywhere, and that includes trans, and therefore Helen Joyce and Kathleen Stock and Julie Burchill and the
Hannah Barnes.
this small handful of people were utter heretics and risking their careers. So it was absolutely the case that you could not say a discouraging word against trans, and therefore my having argued against this movement back in 2016 is one of my few claims to fame. I'm occasionally described as brave, and I think that's probably an exaggeration, but that is one of the only things I've ever done that was brave. And and other people would say it was stupid, which I think that's also true, in a self-interested way. Although one of the nice things, and this also ties into the book, eventually people like us win. Right? Now,
If you say so.
I'm not sure that we all get credit for it. And one of the frustrations is that sometimes when a mania subsides, instead of the people who resisted it getting that credit and benefiting reputationally, there's a kind of embarrassment, and society moves rapidly on.
It's memory holds.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I know. And then there's a kind of rewriting of history.
We never said that. Yeah.
We never said that.
Yeah.
We never believed that.
Mistakes were made, but not by us.
Yeah. It's like the CDC and all the dumb advisories they gave us about COVID, and then they pretend they never said that.
Right.
What do you mean? We never told you the vaccine would mean you couldn't get COVID. It's going to be a little better. You won't be in the hospital. Oh, actually, we never even said that.
I know.
It's just quite astonishing.
No, we never told you not to mask. We never told you mask didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then we never told you they did. I know. Right.
But I mean, it is interesting to look at the resistance. And I mean, I'm pleased to say that I think that small cadre of women, the TERFs, including J.K. Rowling, who have stood up for sanity and also for women's rights in the UK, I think that ultimately they have benefited. I think their stature is higher. I think that their careers have only blossomed as a consequence of sticking their necks out. And this is a rare instance of, the heretics, the people who simply, who constantly said the emperor has no clothes, being rewarded. But I find it's whether or not you're rewarded is inconsistently true. I mean, I actually think in the big picture during woke world, I have probably benefited from living through this tedious and distressing time because I get more attention. And besides which, we've been in an era now for a while that right of center positions, which used to be, of course, considered just normal, but we've moved the needle. They're the ones that are edgy. It's the right of center that has something to say, that seems brave, that and also that
it's counterculture. It's literally countercultural.
It is the counterculture.
Yeah.
And that's why the right-wing podcasts are way better and way more interesting.
Until they get too far. I mean, there's edgy and there's edgelordy. And I think that's when it gets uninteresting to me. Yeah.
I mean, you can go too far with anything.
Yeah.
So, but in general, that's where the fun has been. Not just the intelligence, but the fun.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it is the resistance that's enjoyable viewing. That's
not not the hashtag resistance. The literal resistance.
The real resistance.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the real resistance has had to be on the right because the left has taken over everything. So and that's a good place for me to be. However, it is described because I am naturally resistant. I don't go along with stuff. So this has been in some ways very very artistically and intellectually fruitful for me. My biggest concern, however, all along has been maybe this stuff is so dumb and it will foreshorten so in the rearview mirror that I'm wasting my life.
Oh, well, there's a lot of ways to waste a life. So
yes, there
I guess
are.
Pick the one that's most amusing to you. Well, we need to wrap up pretty soon, but I want to make sure we touch on what your next novel is about. It's about immigration. That's something that is affecting my life directly a lot lately. I'm in Los Angeles. We're having ICE raids all over the place. I know people who are afraid to leave their homes. I know people who are like driving way out of their way so as not to be driving on main roads where they think that they're vulnerable, rightly or wrongly, to immigration searches and possible detainments. I had to go into Home Depot myself recently a couple times because the person who was helping me was afraid to go there himself. And so it's pretty top of mind. And I know you've been thinking a lot about this because this is in fact what your next novel is about. So I don't know what you have to say about that, but what's how are you kind of processing what's been going on with Trump and ICE and all that vis-a-vis your years of thinking for this novel?
Okay, my relationship to immigration is not sentimental. Neither is the book sentimental, although it came out with more balance than I intended.
Oh no.
I couldn't help myself. I mean, I want it to be a good book, and therefore I couldn't write a plump.
Screed, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. It just wasn't going to happen. This is what happens when you don't enforce a law or a set of laws.
Yeah.
You don't enforce them, they don't exist. And then when you start enforcing them again, it's an outrage. I am not tearful about people being ejected from the country because they have no right to be here. And I am in New York right now. But I understand how the entire country got so accustomed to violating immigration law being totally normal that it seems shocking and unfair. And that's partly Biden's fault. And actually, it's not just Biden. I mean, this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
That there is, huge cutting of slack. And as somebody who has twice now gone through the experience of legal acquisition of residency in a foreign country, I resent the fact that in my own country, and also especially in Britain, where I jumped the hoops, if you get in illegally, you don't have to pay anything, and you get all kinds of free stuff. I mean, it's just, You know, if you go through the legal process, it's expensive, it's tedious. You have to produce all these documents. You have to demonstrate that you're not going to be a burden on the state. You need a criminal records check. I mean, it's just the list of stuff that you need to compile to check all the boxes is astonishing. And then you add to that, in the United States, it takes forever, right? There's a very, very long queue.
Decade.
And you're treated like utter rubbish. You're treated basically like a criminal. The real criminals are the people who cross into your country illegally or overstay their visas illegally, and they're treated like God's gift. I mean,
well, okay, I don't know about God's gift, but
right, but they're guests of the nation, and they have all the sympathy. Whereas, you know, I want to rewrite the entire immigration code. I just think the entire system is a farce. The concept of asylum has warped. It's supposed to be for a handful of people who are truly being persecuted politically in their home countries. And no, that's not what it is now. It's just, it's a lie, and it's for economic migration, and we should get rid of it, you know? And also stop making it a blanket carte blanche that everyone gets to apply for asylum. All you have to do is put a foot in the country, and then you have the right to claim asylum. However bogus.
I mean, you can claim it, but you could, you know, that doesn't mean.
Well, yeah, but
there's various things that can happen once you
get up in court for 10 years. Then you've got, you know, you've established a home and a family and everything, and you've got a pretty good case to stay. I mean, Biden let all these people in, and it's going to be very difficult to get even a fraction of them out.
Well, now, but they're running out of people. Well, I don't know about that.
No, they're not running out of people.
Well, but if they have a goal to deport, you know, 1 million people from Los Angeles or something like that, and they can't. But they don't have enough people, so they're going to take people who are not criminals. Right? Exactly.
This is theater. Now, I don't.
Yes, I agree.
It's not fake theater. I mean, these people are genuinely being deported, but ultimately the purpose is deterrent. And it's working. It's working fantastically well. And I'm glad of that. I would prioritize anyone who's on the deportation list already, because they have already been expensively adjudicated.
Deportation for crimes? Because, I mean, a lot of people have orders of removal. I mean,
anyone who has a deportation order already.
But that's probably most of them. And that's because you can have various degrees of removal orders that, you know, build up over a decade or something. But yeah, okay.
But that you've had your day in court and you failed. So, and you didn't leave, right? Okay, so I'd get rid of all those people. And of course, I'd prioritize criminals, which sanctuary cities are making more difficult, because the easiest way to deport criminals is when they're getting out of court or getting out of jail. You take them and you kick them out of the country. But if you let them back out into the community, it's a lot harder to find them. And, you know, so I blame cities like LA and New York for not being sufficiently cooperative on exactly that point. I mean, I believe that we need to start enforcing our immigration laws, and along with it, I would liberalize legal immigration. Yeah, and bring in the people that this country needs, people who would benefit this country, who perhaps are already well educated and accomplished, and are not going to be on welfare. I would certainly increase people like that and make it easier. Make it cheaper, and make it faster. And, you know, one of my biggest disappointments with Trump, not that I had high expectations to begin with, but, you know, in my fantasy world, fantasy Trump administration, would have come in if he had any expectation of winning the election, would have come in with a complete overhaul of the immigration system, ready to go off the shelf from day one. Now that's fantasy world, but it would have been great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I hate the expression, the cruelty is the point. It's used by the left all the time, often over things like abortion, what the Republicans are doing to women and, marginalized people, et cetera. But in this case, I mean, you probably don't agree with this. I'm just saying this. I think the cruelty literally is the point. I mean, we can call it a deterrent. I see it as like a shock and awe campaign that is not effective. The problem is it's not effective. It's not doing what they want to do. It's just terrorizing people. Well, but they're not. They could actually go after
immigration over the southern border has slowed to an absolute
which is fine. But I think that like going in, they want to get a particular person, and then they've got to grab 10 other people who are standing around just to satisfy some Stephen Miller quota. I mean, that to me is like a sick system, and it's not smart. It's stupid and it's cruel. But I think most people would agree that we have had no coherent immigration policy in this country for decades. And you're right that we've reaped what we're now seeing being sown.
Well, we've in not enforcing the law for so long, and also enforcing it so inconsistently.
Yeah.
First we'll make an example of one person, and then the same thing doesn't apply to thousands or millions. It's appalling. But we have basically advertised to the rest of the world, and I've experienced this because I've traveled a lot. People believe they have a human right to immigrate to the United States. I mean, it's universal. The idea of not being allowed to immigrate to the United States is an outrage. You even have people in Britain, for example, claiming that they should be able to vote in American elections.
Well,
because it affects them.
Mm-hmm.
Who's in DC? And they're not entirely joking.
Yeah, well, in a way, that's an American. We're number one, so that's
this weird
feather in our cap.
And it's a one-way presumption. It's a totally one-way presumption. Everyone thinks they have a right to our country, but if we go to their country, we have to get a visa, and they don't have any trouble with keeping people out in their country. So it's all one way, and it's totally unfair. And it's partly our fault because of our own bullshit rhetoric about
and our whole ethos of this is a melting pot. This is we are a land, we are a nation of immigrants. So
but we've set up the mythology that is open for exploitation by the open borders crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, why would we shut anyone out? We're a nation of immigrants, and that's our mythology. So it makes it a lot harder to have an immigration policy. If you do not have borders, you do not have a country. You just have a patch on a map, which anyone can come into, and it completely obliterates the entire concept of citizenship.
Yeah, no, I think that's most people would agree with that. So can you? We got to wrap up, but do you want to tell us a little bit how the novel works? What are the main plot points, and when does it come out?
It comes out in early February.
Okay.
Next year. It's entitled "A Better Life," and it's set in the migrant crisis in New York of 2023 and 2024. And it's based on the fact that the mayor, Eric Adams, in 2023 proposed a program that he never brought to fruition. That is, he said he was planning to ask local New Yorkers to volunteer their spare bedrooms to put put up migrants.
I remember that. Yes.
Right.
Surprised you didn't
Nice.
be able to do a partnership with Airbnb or something for that.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
It disappeared. So, but as soon as I heard of it, I thought, that gives me an idea. So in my book, literally, that program was instituted. So this is a household in Ditmas Park.
In Brooklyn, we should say. Yep.
Ditmas Park is full of really big, beautiful houses that went through a long period of terrible disrepair, but have now been gentrified again. So if you bought cheap, as this family did, you're sitting on a house that's worth millions of dollars. So the story is told from the viewpoint of a son who has graduated from Fordham and is now back at home, like so many sons. He's 26. He's got a small inheritance from his grandfather, so he can cover his out-of-pocket expenses, and has no interest in becoming a grown-up. And he absolutely no ambition. And he at least believes he's perfectly happy until his mother signs up for this program and invites an immigrant from Honduras to live with them. It doesn't stay one immigrant from Honduras. So the rest you have to buy the book to find out what happens. But that's the setup. And I say it's more balanced than I intended. I mean, actually, there is balance in the very design of the book, because it seemed from the perspective of the young man who doesn't want to be a grown-up, whose views on immigration are quite hostile. And one of the reasons that he doesn't like all these immigrants pouring into New York is their dependency. Mm-hmm. You know, they're mooches. Well, what is he? Right?
He's a freeloader in his own way.
Right. He's a freeloader himself. So, I mean, I think this is an accurate observation that mooches don't like other mooches.
No, it's always, you spot it, you got it.
Yep. So that's deeply in the structure of the book, that he's a hypocrite. And it's a book that, it's a story, but there's a lot of discussion of immigration. And if you are interested in the subject, then I think that those discussions are lively and exciting. If you're not interested in immigration, I just don't buy the book.
Well, oh, come on.
You're
going to make your publisher mad again.
Anti-sell. But statistics are on my side.
It sounds like a great story. Come on.
It is an issue which does grab most Americans a lot. So, and because this is a book that does at least represent both sides, it stands out because, most novels are written by lefties, and most novels about immigration are told from the perspective of the immigrant, not from the local population. There are very few exceptions to that. There's a good reason for it as well. I mean, the immigrant is a quester, and
or the other side is the enemy. I'm thinking of Tortilla Curtain, the classic, the T.C. Boyle novel.
I love that book.
I do too.
Actually, I would say that that's one of the only books I can think of that has both sides. Now, ultimately, I think the immigrant gets much more sympathy than the locals.
The fence-obsessed locals.
But at least the locals are represented as having legitimate beefs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but that novel was probably written 30 years ago at this point, if
it's
not
from
more.
The 1990s.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Well, it sounds great. I can't wait for it to come out. And thank you, as always, for talking with me. We're going to see each other next on September 3rd. We're going to do a conversation in New York at the Village Underground. We couldn't find a bookstore to host us, we should say. But there's who knows why. Who knows why? No telling why.
No,
Just could have been a weird timing thing. What's that?
They have busy schedules.
Yeah, there are busy schedules. I might have been a little late. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, but we're going to be talking about my book, The Catastrophe Hour, as well as more about your book. So people will link in the show notes to where they can buy tickets. But we're going to be 6 p.m. at the Village Underground in the Village in New York. We'll be out of there by 7:30 p.m. because comedy's going to start at 8. So people should.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I always love talking with you, and now we'll do it on a stage. So anyway, thank you as always for taking the time, and have a good rest of your summer.
Thank you.
That was my conversation with novelist and columnist Lionel Shriver. Her most recent novel is Mania, and we will have another conversation on stage in real life in New York City on September 3rd at the Village Underground, starting at 6 p.m. We're going to be selling copies of my book there. And the link to purchase tickets is in the show notes. You can also go to meghandaum.com/events. And if you purchase your ticket by August 1st using promo code Catastrophe18, it's only $18. It's a bargain for New York. I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. Thanks for listening. See ya then.